Welcome, Naomi.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and excited to see all of all the attendees. Welcome to the session. So I will begin by sharing my screen. Okay, everyone can see that first screen, the EDI screen?
Yep, we can see it.
Awesome, thank you. So just a bit of an outline of what you can expect from today's session. So before we begin the webinar, I do want to have my Indigenous land acknowledgement, as I do have the privilege to work in Mississauga, Ontario, Canada, as a settler to this land. And I would like to begin this webinar by acknowledging the land on which I live and work as part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. For thousands of years, Indigenous people inhabited and cared for this land and continue to do so today. In particular, I acknowledge the territory of the Anishinaabeg, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe Chippewa people, the land that is home to the Métis, and most recently, the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations, who are direct descendants of the Mississaugas of the Credit. I am grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on this land, and by doing so, give my respect to its first inhabitants. The other acknowledgement that I do want to make sure I give is the acknowledgement to both Ella and Y Space in their allyship, in them realizing that entrepreneurs, regardless of what stage you're at, whether you are just thinking about starting your entrepreneurial journey or you're ready to scale up and accelerate your business, that equity, diversity, and inclusion is a fundamental practice that really should be part of everyone's business development plan and journey. So thank you both to Y Space and Ella for allowing me to present today. Diana gave you my nice little profile speech of who I am, but I wanted to share with you how I got on my own EDI journey. It's funny, this is a straight line arrow, but my journey was nothing like a straight line. So I would think that my first lived experiences really came from all of the experiences I had immigrating to Canada. I was part of the early immigration wave. I came from the Philippines in the early 70s and really experienced, had my first lived experience around assimilation, being the first of my culture to live in certain suburbs, attend certain schools. So that was sort of the beginning of what I didn't realize was me trying to figure out diversity and inclusion and how I fit in. I actually started my career as a clinician. I graduated as an occupational therapist before moving to the business world. And in that, I really first learned around the sociological theories and understanding the importance of advocacy, ableism, and the barriers that people with impairments and illnesses face, and had to really learn to become an advocate for health equity and reintegration for my patients and their families. I began to move to program management, project management, and I worked for the Ontario Home Care Program for several years, 13 years, where I started to work in projects and programs that increased equity and access to programs. One of the ones that I spent several years doing was improving the equity for children with special needs for the school health program. And we were one of the first home care programs in our region to incorporate supportive housing and assisted living for people with certain impairments, and increasing the access and the accessibility for that through the region. I then moved into the corporate and technology sector. I worked for a company called Point Click Care. They were an electronic health records platform for senior living and post-acute care. And in that, I became a people leader. And it became increasingly obvious to me how important it was to understand bringing a diverse team to the table, for making sure our practices looked at things innovatively, for creating good practice, for challenging growth in the organization, and how I, as a leader, was really responsible for creating a climate of inclusion. Unfortunately, at the same time, as I was moving up into leadership roles in corporate sector, I was getting to live experiences that I was hearing about that many females and people of color experience at times, trying to maneuver through some systems that have been entrenched in some barriers. So this led to me deciding to do some formal diversity and inclusion training. I did recently get my certification through eCornell University. And since leaving Point Click Care, I now have my own business consulting firm. And the majority of the work I've been doing, and some of it last year, and this is how I got introduced to Ella, was I was doing some business optimization and process consulting for the Ella program with their mentor matching process. And this really opened my eyes to this world of entrepreneurship. And I wanted to merge my knowledge of program management, change management, business analysis, and merge that with equity, diversity, and inclusion, how you embed that in business today. It's a little bit about me. So the reason I've asked folks to have a separate tablet or phone is I want this session to be as interactive as possible. And I'm going to be using a website. And the website is www.menti.com. I'm going to switch to that screen and you're just going to await instructions. So we're going to together learn and familiarize ourselves with that website. So because later on there'll be faster, more interactive, fun exercises to do there. So I'm going to stop sharing that. Okay, so if you could go either to a second screen and launch your browser, or on your phone, open up your browser, whichever you use, and go to www.menti.com. And the room code that you'll be entering is 1047608. So this is basically an introduction icebreaker. Let's get to know each other a little bit. It's hard with a group of so many people on Zoom, but I do always like to start with some type of fun icebreaker whenever I run a webinar or workshop. So let's find out how diverse this group is. So, and don't hit enter each time, but type in these 3 pieces of information about yourself. Your first name, your country of birth, and the current city that you live in. And then when you do that, it should show up. Wow, lots of Canada, but a lot of people coming from all over the globe as well. We've got Iran, Bangladesh, I think I saw India and Portugal. Oh, and Ryu, you're in Guinea-Bissau is where you live? Is that Ryu?
Can I talk?
Yeah. Where's
Okay.
Guinea-Bissau?
Guinea-Bissau, it's the country between Senegal, Dakar is more new because it's right in Canada, and Conakry, Guinea-Conakry.
Wow.
So it's a country right downside of Dakar.
Oh, I think your screen froze. Thank you. Oh, welcome. You've come from far away. Thank you for joining. Yeah, lots of people living in the GTA, Greater Toronto, and then Southern Ontario. Welcome, everyone. We have a quite diverse group. I love to see that. Okay, let's do the next piece. So what personal pronouns do you use when you introduce yourself? And I forgot to let people know my pronouns are she and her. Awesome. I feel like I can hear background noise of one participant possibly not on mute. I don't know, Diana, if you see somebody.
Yep, just took care of it. Yeah, Thank just you. A reminder, if everyone can stay on mute, that would be great.
Awesome. Well, for an Ella edition, we have a strong he, him representation. That's great. It's, you know, part of diversity, equity, inclusion, regardless of whether it's Ella edition or not, is learning to do allyship. So that's wonderful. And then our last one of getting to know each other. If someone asked to just If you had to describe yourself, would you say you're an introvert where you prefer solitude and quiet, extrovert where you prefer social gatherings or outgoing, or an ambivert, which is really situational, that you can really excel at either or depending on your mood that day or the people that are there or the type of event that you're at. So which one would you vote for? I think we're waiting for one more person to vote for the data to come in. Oh, my bad. There we go. Wow, lots of ambiverts. Great. Welcome. I won't, for the introverts, don't worry, I'm not going to put anyone on the spot or make you do anything that will draw attention to you. Fantastic. The ambivert is a very recent term that my daughter educated me on. She's 14 and we were talking about whether she was an introvert or extrovert, and she said she felt like she was an ambivert. So I learned something new from her just in the last few years. Okay, so that's Menti. Please don't close that screen. We're going to be jumping back and forth to that as we learn new concepts. There'll be fun interactive activities that we'll use from there. Okay, so I will just go back to my presentation. Great. So really the objectives of today and what I hope you gain by the end of the time we're together is a really improved understanding of what I would call your foundational equity, diversity, and inclusion terms, the principles, the guiding principles, and the concepts. I also hope after the activity we do later on in the second half of this session, you have an increased self-awareness of your own subconscious biases. We all have them, and it's important that we learn about them and do our own self-assessment. But as you're about to embark, or maybe you've already embarked on your exciting entrepreneur journey, what I hope you also gain from today is a sense of empowerment on how to embed those EDI strategies into your business, the services and products and processes that you plan to implement. Just a few ground rules. Please, it is going to be a webinar that I hope we can have lots of participation, so please feel free to participate during those group activities. I do ask that that you commit to active listening, that you give yourself the gift of these 2 hours and try not to get too distracted by text messages and everything coming in. I know life is busy, but honor this time for yourself. The other reason is there is some quizzes to solidify your learning. So if you're not actively listening, it's hard to participate in the quizzes. Please, the other thing I ask is that you keep an open mind. There are going to be concepts in here that can feel uncomfortable when we talk about race and gender and marginalizations of groups and racializations of groups and your own biases. They can kind of create a little bit of discomfort. Keep an open mind and just know that this is a place of trust and respect. Everybody's story is valid. We want everyone to feel seen and heard, and it is a safe space. There is, I will try to field questions in true time as we can. If the question that you ask is about to be answered, I may let you know that, and I'll look to Diana to flag me if there is a question that someone's asking. And to just really remember that if you are feeling any of that discomfort related to the subject matter, that it's really meaning that you're growing and that you're challenging and that you've now learned some new things about running a business and EDI. So as I said early on, and you saw that in the outline, we're going to focus on really understanding terminology and concepts, specifically diversity, inclusion, equity versus equality, unconscious bias, psychological safety, belonging, and engagement. And the reason we need to understand those terms is because it's become quite popular to talk about EDI. And what we're starting to see is that people are using terms either incorrectly or interchangeably, and they don't all mean the same thing. And it really is important that we're all sort of aligned and speaking the same language. Before we really get into the content of today, though, I'm going to show you a statement, and I want you to sort of think about it. This came through on one of my social media feeds, and when I saw it, it really impacted me. So if you think about diversity, equity, inclusion, think about it this way. Diversity is a fact, equity is a choice, inclusion is an action, and belonging is actually the outcome. So when you see that, does any of that resonate with you? Does any of it surprise or confuse you? And if it does, hopefully what you learned today will give you more clarity around why it's been phrased this way. And, you know, when you look at that, have you ever thought about EDI this way before? Because I think, like I said, everybody sort of thinks it's all one big concept, that it's not these very clear distinctions and delineations. So let's talk about diversity and inclusion, the latest buzzwords, the latest buzz terms. What's really, what I'd love for you guys to understand is that they're actually not synonymous. They're actually quite distinct and different. Okay, so let's take a look at those differences together. So diversity is actually the what. In that we mean it focuses on the makeup of your team and organization or your workforce at large. So think about where you work right now. If you're working, think about if you're going to school. What do those teams look like? What, right? So it focuses on demographics and social categorization. And when we talk about diversity and inclusion in business and in the workplace, diversity means that that organization employs a team of people that reflects the society in which it exists and operates. So it's also, you might hear the term, it's about representation at the table, at the team, right? So think about that. When you think about where you work right now, when you look at your leadership levels, if you're in a larger organization, or if you look at school and you look at groups that are more influential, do those teams look diverse? Do they represent the organization? Do they represent where you live and work? Can you see yourself reflected and represented in some of those? When I worked, where I worked, because it was a technology and engineering company building electronic health solutions, at the core of the business, it totally reflected, because it was engineers. It was at the frontline level. It very much reflected society, the diversity that Canada and the GTA had. But as soon as you started to move upwards in the organization, it changed dramatically. It became very homogeneous in gender and in ethnicity. And so how do we break those barriers, right? The how is the inclusion part, right? So it is a necessary foundation that actually continues to enable diversity. And because it embraces different perspectives, and it does not tolerate a culture of inclusion. So without inclusion, what diversity starts to look and feel like to those that are brought in purely because they meet a checkmark demographic is, if they're not included, they feel like what you might hear as a term, the token hire, right? I had to. It was part of my requirement to hire a different gender, a different race, a different religion, a different level of ability. So in a truly inclusive culture, and when inclusion is lived, it recognizes that everyone's unique, differing contributions are valuable. They're not just there for the sake of being there, and they're not just tolerated. They actually get integrated and are seen as very valuable. So in the workplace, this means that all individuals are given equitable opportunity to work, to be recognized, and to be promoted. So that's where the difference fundamentally lies between diversity and inclusion. But I love this quote, because this quote really sums it up really nicely. Diversity is the mix of people, but inclusion is really how you make that mix work. How do you maximize the value of that mix? Let's further break down some components of diversity. So remember, diversity it's those characteristics that describe the differences among people. It really focuses on those differences. It looks at characteristics that are usually very easily visible, and you can probably start categorizing people through very minimal interaction. But there is this other dimension of diversity, and that dimension is at a bit of a deeper level, and it's those internal characteristics that can also describe differences. So if you think back to that icebreaker introduction that we just did on Mentee, those are examples, right? We started with your characteristic diversities. Where were you born? Where did you live? Those are maybe more visible or easily to categorize or understand with very minimal interaction with you. But then we went to, well, what are your pronouns, right? Because your pronouns that you personally use aren't always that obvious. And then we talked about that deeper level of characteristic. What do you classify yourself as? Introvert, extrovert, or ambivert? So those are the difference. So those external categorizations and those internal categorizations and characteristics. So who cares? Why is diversity important to a business? And why is there this movement and this push, particularly in North America, to have this diversity at work and in business and in the products that you develop? When I was going through my certification for diversity inclusion, there's this concept and this notion that there is a diversity value proposition. That when you bring a diverse group of members together, you naturally have an increase in perspective. It should push innovation further. It should challenge the status quo and open up markets and ideas that you never thought were possible. So there is this value proposition to diversity. The difficulty is when you bring diverse people together, what you do end up also seeing is idea conflict. People are challenging maybe what the dominant voices or the systemic voices tend to say. And so what really needs to happen, and this is where diversity and inclusion start to intersect, is there has to be this learning and idea integration. You have to move beyond, well, that's just a different opinion, but this is really the way we're going to do things, into integrating and learning and understanding where's that story coming from, where is that idea coming from. And really the working group needs to fully integrate, how do you bring those different ideas in together so that you're bringing it part of your decision making process, and then it also becomes part of how you know you're performing well or poorly when you are trying new things or innovating new ideas. So the diversity value proposition acknowledges that there's sort of stages that you have to go through, but if you are able to work through those stages, you can really gain a cutting edge over companies that don't implement diversity and inclusion initiatives into their business. Let's also take a look a little bit about not just anecdotal things, but what does that data say? So there's a very interesting article that was just produced by McKinsey and Company. It's Diversity Wins and How Inclusion Matters. And they did sort of a longitudinal study. They published the paper just last year in 2020. So they followed an organization from 2014, 2017, and 2019. And what they learned was that it reaffirmed that there is a very strong business case for both gender diversity and ethnic and cultural diversity, particularly at the corporate leadership level. It shows that the business case continues to strengthen over time. And what you see here, this is the screen capture I took, is about financial outperformance. So what people always care about is how much money we're bringing in, are we generating revenue, how are we doing fiscally? The most diverse companies are now likely to, more than ever, to outperform the less diverse peers on profitability. So in 2019 alone, the analysis finds that companies in the top quartile of gender diversity, particularly on the executive team level, were 25% more likely to have above average profitability than those that were in the lower quartile. right? That's up from 21% in 2017 and then up from 15% in 2014. They also found that the greater the representation from an ethnic diversity perspective, the higher the likelihood of outperformance. So the data is there. People understand the importance of it. They understand that to do it means that we are gaining ground on competition. But what was interesting is this article still says progress remains slow, especially as people are trying to break through what has traditionally been held by a homogeneous group, which is the senior executive leadership level. And right, I can only speak for North American, so Canadian and US cultures, is that it tends to be a white male dominated senior leadership team that they're seeing. And there is still struggle with how do we bring up and include and ensure that we are having that diversity value proposition at all levels of the organization. So really, when you talk about diversity and inclusion, what you're really talking about is how does a business evolve from just being about diversity, where your focus is, let's bring in as many different characteristics and visible representation. Let's meet target measures. Let's do some checkbox activities where when I look out, I see, yes, wonderful, all different types of faces and genders and levels of ability and sexual orientation and religion. But if you don't evolve to the point of inclusion, and this is where we are now seeing is the breaking point from companies that only stop at diversity at the surface level, they're struggling. If they cannot celebrate the diversity, if they don't proactively learn about why those different contributions and backgrounds bring forward value, and if the folks that you hire feel like they're only been hired because they were a KPI, a key performance indicator, but you're really not interested in what they have to say, they're not really bringing their whole self to work. So you're not really maximizing the value of what they're bringing. So when you're looking at inclusion, you're moving away from that metric focus. You're really emphasizing the people, the culture, the organizational culture, and you're emphasizing moving into a climate that has psychological safety and where belonging is deeply present within the team, right? So there is a wonderful woman by the name of Verna Myers. If you don't know her, she is one of my heroes in the diversity, equity, and inclusion movement. I love this quote by her. So diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion is being asked to dance, right? So you're not just there because, well, we were told to have you here, but we are including you in the celebration. We're bringing you onto the dance floor. We're living, we're seeing you, we're validating you. Verna Myers has founded her own company where she works on cultural change, and she's a strong influencer. And interestingly enough, Netflix was smart enough to hire her as their VP of inclusion strategy for their company. So she's got some great TED Talks. So if you're interested in listening to some of her TED Talks, she has quite a few out there. So let's just reinforce. So what really is inclusion? It's that ideal state. It's when people feel like, yep, I'm an insider. I totally belong here. I've been welcomed by my group. I can say what I think and not worry that it's not the same as my manager or my VP. It's where employees feel safe to be themselves. They're valued for their uniqueness. But what's important here is inclusion doesn't happen, or true inclusion doesn't happen totally at an individual level. It's when a group of individuals sit and have coffee and they talk about their collective experience and how they are perceiving that organization and its leadership, right? They are having a collective experience together on a daily basis, saying they're not only talking about, our leaders aren't only talking about diversity and inclusion, they're actually living and breathing it. And I am feeling the end result of it. I'm experiencing that piece. It's not only about that I trust you, you know, you're my coworker, I trust you, but that I also consistently experience psychological safety at work. And we'll talk a little bit more about what psychological safety is. So there is a slight difference between trust and psychological safety. So psychological safety is really that belief that your environment is so safe you can be vulnerable, you can take risks, and actually that people are expecting you to do that. They want you to do that, right? You're not worried about punitive punishment. So trust is, you know, you'll give them the benefit of the doubt. You may take the risk, but you don't feel fully safe all the time in every situation because you're worried that you will there will be retaliation or that there is some type of punishment or lack of acknowledgement or lack of recognition when you do share your full self and your ideas. So really that concept of psychological safety is so essential for inclusion and engagement, right? How do you know their psychological safety? So think about your team that you currently work in, your current working group, whether that's somewhere you volunteer, somewhere you go to school or work. Do you experience psychological safety on a daily basis? How do you know if you do? Do you feel like you have complete freedom to be unique? Are your relationships very high trust? And do you have meaningful social connections? But most importantly, do you have no fear of punishment for a differing opinion? And do you feel like there is no subgroup formation? There are no, well, they're really the in-group. They really make the decisions. We just take the marching orders. Are you really part of that decision-making and integrated into that decision-making process? How do you know you have a strong inclusion climate? You will have a whole group, including its leaders, that have an openness to learning, that value and recognize the uniqueness, and they openly show that recognition, that all the members together feel a sense of belonging by all the members, and that there is this shared perception of fairness and respect, that there are norms of what are acceptable behaviors, and they're role modeled right from your line manager to everyone on that team to their director, their VP, all the way up throughout the organization. And that different ideas are integrated into the decision-making process. So that's how you know that the climate is inclusive. When I presented this a few weeks ago, I had an interesting situation where, you know, very courageously, one of the leaders on the team put his hand up and said, well, our team is all white and male, but I feel like we're inclusive. Can't we be inclusive even if we're not diverse? And I think that that's a slippery slope when you have sort of that thinking, because when the folks that are reporting to you are looking at your team and looking for themselves represented, will they feel like there is that sense of belonging, that you will understand, that you will have empathy and an understanding, and that you will have a welcome openness to their differing ideas and where they come from and their own personal experiences? So you have to remember, you can have the best of intentions as a business owner, as a leader, to be inclusive, but your actions speak louder than words, right? So it's really about how the perception lands at the end of the day. If you build those two strong foundations of psychological safety and that strong inclusion climate, what you get to reap the benefits of is what we call a high engagement workforce. And why is that important? Well, you retain staff, You get to attract talent. And the staff that are there, they want to be high performers. They want to be self-initiating and force multipliers. They actually look forward to challenges at work and stretch. You know your workforce isn't experiencing high engagement when people are sort of just punching the clock, not wanting to learn and grow and have conversations with you about career development. So you're going to run your own business and you're going to therefore be a leader as a business owner. How can you be sure that you are being inclusive? How do you know? You have to do stuff. It doesn't happen organically. You can't do it just through being well, I went to this webinar by Naomi and I learned about it and I tucked it away and I hope that it'll just come out of me and I'll become this inclusive leader. It takes work. It takes vulnerability. It takes courage. It takes constantly assessing and observing what's going on in your business, what's going on with how your clients are your customers, your clients are reacting to you, how your teams are functioning. You have to observe and you have to, unfortunately, you have to ask, how am I being perceived? What does my brand look like? And when you're not hearing all of those things that you think you should be perceived as, that's when you should start creating that action plan. And how will you measure it? And it's cyclical. It never changes. You never stop changing or growing. And you can never be too inclusive, right? Everybody has so many levels of biases and assumptions that you really are just tackling one at a time, right? So remember, you can ask these questions to yourself, or you can ask these questions to your team, sorry. Do you feel safe to voice a differing opinion than mine, an idea, and see what they say? And you don't have to ask them to their straight one-on-one. That might be a bit intimidating. You might want to do a survey. So ask them, do they perceive, do you feel like there really is one working group, or do you feel like these little side groups and that you're an outsider? Do they see themselves represented and valued at a leadership level? Do they have a clear understanding of how they will be sponsored or mentored to maximize their full potential? Are those questions being asked? What are your dreams? What are your hopes, your aspirations? How do you want to contribute more to my business? And think about how your own actions, decisions, and behaviors are being perceived. Do you really promote that openness when you're having conversations, when your team is brainstorming the next product idea? Are people being fully transparent? If you see little microaggressions happening, are you role modeling that that's not acceptable? That there's a zero tolerance for that exclusionary behavior? Because like I said, I can have every hashtag in the world and I can create all these wonderful events for my company. But if I run a meeting and I let people bulldoze, finish people's sentences, not validate an idea, take someone else's idea as their own, there's an incongruency there. And so therefore the perception is not that you are this inclusive leader who's promoting an inclusion climate. So those are some really important questions to ask yourself and your team. Okay, so that's very heavy stuff. It's very heady stuff. So let's do a little bit of fun stuff related to diversity and representation. So I don't know how many of you know of the actress Gina Davis. She's a famous American actress. She's been in many, many movies, Thelma and Louise. Trying to think of all of her movies. I can't think of any right now. But she's quoted this line: if she can see it, she can be it. And not only does she fundamentally believe this in her activism, she's actually created an organization, and you can go to cjane.org, where she uses data, and it's an institute on gender and media, where she studies data on how marginalized groups, women, people of color, people of different LGBTQ community, How are they represented in the media? And what happens if you change that representation? She's using data to show the big media corporations the importance of not just seeing every single person through a single lens. What happens when you do that is some pretty interesting stuff. And like I said, this is a little bit female focused, but the rule probably applies to all types of other marginalized or racialized groups. So what she found that depicting women in non-traditional empowering roles actually has a real world impact. One of the big examples that I got a kick out of, because I used to watch CSI, the original Vegas one, not the one that's just come back out, but I think it came out in the early 2000s. What that was the first time that an ensemble cast had strong female scientists, forensic scientists leading crime investigations. And what they found happened was when they saw themselves, when women saw themselves represented this way, they saw an increase in women enrollment in forensic science programs. There was a wave of them entering the workforce. And now they actually fully represent half of the forensic workforce in many jurisdictions in the USA. These are American studies because Gina Davis is American. Another funny thing. So Gina Davis is the voice of Merida in the movie, the Disney movie Brave, where that lead character is amazing with a bow and arrow. She's an archery master. They actually found out that the percentage of girls that take up archery when the movie Brave and the whole Hunger Games series came out shot up 105%, higher than adult men signing up to learn archery. So you can see that power, that influence that you can have when you do something intentionally and proactively, and you challenge the norm of how things have traditionally been seen. So you're going to be an entrepreneur, you already are. So what are those benefits of embedding diversity and inclusion? They're all here in front of you. They all give you the research time and time again has shown that you will have higher innovation. You will most likely find opportunities that people have neglected because they don't see that possible potential diversity in the marketplace. You'll have better attraction of talent. You can attract talent better, and most likely have less churn. Ultimately, all becoming more profitable, right? Having that profit margin increase. It really is very exciting as an entrepreneur because you have that power to do that. You have that power in your product, in your marketing campaign, in the way your processes treat people and your services treat people, to tell them, I see you, I hear you, you're a valuable customer to me. I'm ready to disrupt. I'm ready to do something different, right? Than what's been done out there maybe is not meeting your business need. So if we can get the chat going, I need to have it showing on mine. Let's do something fun. So if you go into your chat, let's take a look at diversity and equity in action. Okay, so I'm going to bring up some companies that are doing some interesting and great work around embedding EDI into their marketing campaigns or into their product development. So let's take a look at the first one. Oh, why is it not progressing? There we go. So everybody knows Mattel and the very successful Barbie doll. So Barbie's been around since 1959, and when she first came out, she had one skin tone, 2 hair colors, and 2 body types. Okay, so how many skin tones currently do you think she has now? If you had to guess, just throw it up in the chat. How many do you think? I see 6, I see 4. It's higher. I see 8. It's actually higher than 15, if you can believe it. So Mattel has created 35 skin tones for Barbie now. Take a look at the doll on the far right. Do you see something about her skin tone? She actually has a very common skin disorder called vitiligo. And it's quite common in people who have darker skin tones. And so they're even thinking that far out of the box to show representation and inclusion. How many body types do you think there are now with Barbie? There used to be 2, Ken and Barbie, if you had to guess. Any guesses? 30? No, not quite. I think that might cost them too much. Yeah, it's a little less than 12 and 15. They're at 9 body types now. But what will blow your mind is they are at 94 hairstyles. So colors, hairstyles. So they really are trying to increase representation that way. I thought that was kind of neat. They have come a long way. Okay, let's take a look at Crayola. So Crayola Crayon introduced 30 new colors. They called it the colors of the world. So Crayola was founded long ago, 1903. What year do you think they finally realized that we all did not have a peach skin tone? 2019, 1982. Yeah, no, not. It wasn't in the 2000s, but it wasn't in the 80s either. So yeah, close. Forest has 1995. So it's 1992 that they launched this. I've never personally seen them, but my sister was out doing back to school shopping and she saw them just this last year. So I think that that's wonderful. So that shows you that. How about, let's take a look at this. So in this year, Old Navy launches Body Quality. So just this year, they've Old Navy's clothing company introduced this new mission and clothing line for women. Does anybody know what's special about it and what their mission statement promises? Any guesses? Nope. So their mission statement, clothing, yep, that's right. So their mission statement is in all stores, online, wherever you find us, you'll find all styles, all sizes at the same price. So I don't know. I see a yes. I don't know if people realize this, that the fashion industry for quite some time did not use equitable pricing based on size. So, and that they would only carry one of and send one of every store of like the wider variation of sizes. So Old Navy is really leading the charge. Their new campaign ad is wonderful. They look a lot like this picture here. Lots of different sizes, shapes, colors, as well, skin tones. So, and let's do one more before we go on break. So Sesame Street, some of us grew up watching this. They've been entertaining and educating children for 52 years. Oh, somebody put Lululemon is still far behind for size equity. Yeah, they certainly are. And their CEO got into a bit of trouble with some of his comments around sizing, I think, a few years ago. See the new puppet there? So what's the new puppet on Sesame Street? Has anybody heard about this in the media? Yes, Korean. She's the new Asian American puppet. So it's been 52 years. She's the first Asian American puppet on Sesame Street. Her name is Ji Young. And the reason they decided to bring her forward is because of to counteract some of the Asian hate that has happened recently due to the pandemic. So she's just been recently introduced. I think her first episode airs this week. So it's quite, I think these are fantastic examples of equity and, diversity and inclusion in action. So I hope that that motivates you too when you think about your own products and service. We will start with a video that I feel from Rising Tide Center that I feel really explains it well. And what I want you to do when you watch this video is pay attention to what are the key differences between the two terms. What does equality assume about achieving success? What is an equity mindset? And what about the concept of fairness? Does it really work? So those are some things. There may be a fun pop quiz after this on Menti, so you may want to pay a little bit of attention. So let me queue up that video here.
Naomi, was there supposed to be sound on here? Because I don't seem to hear anything.
Okay. Sorry, let me pause. Oh, I thought I had shared with sound. My bad. Let me stop share and I'll restart it. Oh, so I'm sorry. I thought I had set up my system for share with sound. Let me start it again.
Today we are talking about equity and equality. But you might be wondering, wait, aren't these the same thing? They look the same. They sound similar. So aren't they the same? No, in fact, they're really different concepts, even though a lot of us get the two confused. So let's break them down. You probably already know what we mean when we say equality. We're talking about two things that are the same or have a similar value. When we treat two people or two groups of people equally, we make sure that they have or get the same things. For example, if I want to give Betty some apples, then I need to give Ben the same number of apples to treat them with equality. Along the same lines, if I want to give the nursing program a budget increase, then I need to make sure that I give the culinary arts program the same budget increase to treat them with equality. That makes sense. But that's not the same thing as equity. Equity can be defined as giving everyone what they need to be successful. In other words, it's not giving everyone the exact same thing. And here's where the difference between equity and equality really come in, because it's important to remember that if we give everyone the exact same thing, expecting that will make people equal, it assumes that everyone started out in the same place. So here's an example. In this instance, we give everyone the exact same box, we treat them with equality, so that they can see over the fence. Well, that's great for the person on the left because they were already taller, but it's not so great for the person on the right who still can't see over the fence. From an equity perspective, we wouldn't want everyone to have the same size box because everyone isn't the same height to start out with. With an equity mindset, we would get everyone what they need to raise them up to the same level. Here's another example. With equality in mind, we can treat everyone the same and give them all the same bike, but that doesn't really help the person on the left who can't ride that kind of bike, or the person in the middle that is too small for that bike. So when we think about this situation with equity in mind, equity tells us that we need to give everybody a different kind of bike so they can all enjoy a bike ride. As you might guess, this is where the concept of fairness gets tricky for some folks. We often think that being fair means that everybody gets the same thing, and that's what we were taught when we were growing up. But fairness really only works when we're all the same to start out with. So this is a new idea for many of us to think about. There is this great American saying that people just need to work hard enough and pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. It's this idea that everyone can be successful if you just work hard enough. Well, that's a lot easier to do when some of us were born with longer arms to pull up those bootstraps, or maybe we were given longer bootstraps when we bought our boots. So let's think about moving away from the bootstrap idea and instead think about shoes. There is a quote by Nahid Dasani that goes, "Equality is giving everyone a shoe, but equity is giving everyone a shoe that fits."
I really like the way they explain that concept. It is one that we use those terms interchangeably, but for it's equity, diversity, inclusion, not equality, diversity, inclusion that we're trying to strive for. So, you know, you really are looking at equity so that you focus on those individual needs. You recognize that there may be differences. So you're looking at a much more needs-based approach. You're expecting those individual differences and that diversity. Whereas with equality, it's really just about sameness regardless of context and the individual's needs. And it does not recognize or give value to those individual differences, abilities, and diversity. So that's why you're hearing the term equity, diversity, and inclusion. So let's have some fun and let's solidify some of that learning. So go back to Menti for me. I'm going to pull up Mentimeter here. Okay. So is everybody on this slide now?
Oh, you like that?
Yeah. I just didn't turn my video on.
Oh, sorry. Everybody on the slide, if you can put, just go back. If you logged out of the room, you need to go back into menti.com and log in 1047608. Otherwise, if you could just hit the heart, and then we'll know that you're in the room and you can do the quiz based on the video you just saw. I see 13 hearts. I don't know if we had a few people drop off because we were at 21 before. I want to make sure we give people a chance to get back in. Okay. I think we stagnated at 14, so I'll move along. So what you're going to see is you're going to see a scenario, and you're going to decide based on that scenario and what you just learned the difference between equity and equality was, whether it's an example of equity or equality. So the tip is you get higher scores for the more correct answers. Ready? Look at your phone. It's probably a better user, or your tablet. User experience. And vote on your device. All right, so Jeff is currently in the lead. You'll get a chance to accumulate more points. Eventually, there will be another section of a quiz, one final one. Let's go back. So hopefully that helps solidify those concepts of equity versus equality. Let's talk about unconscious bias. How many people are familiar with this term? Maybe just if you want to put a thumbs up if you've heard this term before, when equity, diversity, inclusion, yeah. A few people are familiar with it. So I will just give you some of the fundamental key concepts around that. So unconscious bias is important to understand that this is an automatic physiological and neurological response to information processing and storage. It's really our brain's way of creating a bunch of shortcuts to validate information, and it does that by aligning and checking against some pre-existing beliefs. It's a very automatic judgment response. We're not aware of it, which is why it's called unconscious bias. It lies beneath that conscious level. It also, our brains tell us that this bias is objective and helps to make objective decisions. So we're not even aware that we perhaps are not making the most objective decisions when we're using our biases to lead our action or decision-making process. Our unconscious bias are formed by past experiences and messages that we receive by our brain all day long since we were born, right? The thing that's really important to understand is we all have unconscious bias. No one is excluded from this. And the reason is how it's formed. So scientists and neuroscientists have studied, and they approximate that at any given moment in the day, at any second, your brain unknowingly is trying to process 11 million pieces of information. Sights, sounds, colors, and it's trying to categorically process it, store it, cross-validate it, but really only 40 pieces of the 11 million that are being bombarded at you are you processing on a conscious level, right? So that's a pretty bad absorption rate. It's a pretty bad processing rate at 0.0001%. You wouldn't buy a computer that processes at that rate, but that's the computer that we were born with physiologically. So what do we do to cope with that bombardment of information? Scientists say, and the diversity and equity inclusion concepts and theory says that we actually use two parts of our brain. We use what we call the conscious brain. That brain works with facts, it works with data, but it has limitations. It has very little capacity and it has very slow processing speed. So then what we start to do to make up for that is we have the other part of our brain, which is our unconscious brain, which is very much habit and intuition driven. It has an enormous capacity, huge capacity, and it's extremely fast at processing. So that's how we cope with all that information on a daily basis. So there's advantages to this unconscious brain, right? It means that when you see something, you can quickly recognize it, you can sort it into patterns of previous people and things that you know about. And if we think about things like having to quickly identify something, it's very, very good for when you want to know, is this a dangerous situation? Should I be initiating my fight or flight response at this point? So it can recognize. So you're taking a walk on the beach, your unconscious brain very quickly tells you that those fins popping out of the water is a surfboard upside down and not a shark, right? That's what your unconscious brain is really good at. It leaves then your conscious brain to do that deeper analysis of things that are new or unknown. And the unconscious brain actually allows you to effectively function with your daily interactions so that not every single thing that you're experiencing is like you're experiencing it new and for the first time. So there are definite advantages to that unconscious brain. There's a reason we have it. However, there are some disadvantages to that. One of the things is that all of that information that you've gathered through your lifetime, through your experiences, it's pretty subjective information. It's based on your own personal experiences, perhaps media, what you watch, what you read, the culture that you grew up in, and also the people you admire and the messaging and the life lessons that they taught you. So not all of that information is 100% objective. And often, sometimes assumptions are wrong. As you grow up and you're exposed to more ideas and you have more life experiences, you realize perhaps some of those earlier assumptions you have are wrong. But the difficulty is your unconscious brain makes you believe that they're all correct and that they are all based on objective decision making and categorization. There is one really significant disadvantage to the unconscious brain and the unconscious bias. And that's this additional bias that we call the affinity bias. And all human beings have it. It's it's the bias where we respond positively to people who look, sound, and act like ourselves. So scientists have done MRI imaging of people who are presented with different photographs. And they see that when people are presented with people that don't look like them, that look different, it activates parts of brains that alerts the potential of risk, of the unknown. And it tells the brain to quickly judge. And where does the brain go for that judgment? It goes where it can quickly process. It goes to the unconscious bias level. And it works on those assumptions. So the affinity bias coupled with your unconscious brain and those unconscious biases can trigger and categorize the person you meet within milliseconds, whether they're good or bad, whether there's somebody you should trust or not trust, whether there's somebody you should engage with or not, or if you should. And what people need to know is that even if you consciously reject group stereotypes, even if you say, I don't believe that stereotype about the white male leader. I don't believe that stereotype about women. I don't believe that stereotype about this certain cultural group. Your unconscious brain is sometimes feeding you biased data that you're not even aware of, and you're making some snap judgments in that time within milliseconds, right? So we'll talk a little bit more about how can we challenge that part and how can we grow. But let's talk about why is it important for a business and entrepreneurs to be aware of this. So if you don't increase your awareness around unconscious bias and you don't do anything intentionally and proactively to address it, it can have some really negative impacts as you try to develop and grow your business. First of all, you're probably going to not have the most equitable recruitment practices because you're going to hire people that look, sound, feel comfortable to you and are like you. So now you've lost that ability to have that diversity value proposition that we saw early on can really give you the cutting edge as a business. There's an interesting exercise that is often done by HR teams where, somebody says, I need to fill this role. They go through the effort of writing the job description, and the HR person says, now picture what they look like. And then they say, well, why do they have to look like that? Where is that coming from? Why do they have to sound like that? What is that image? And so there is a lot of just trying to make sure that recruitment is not biased. You could be unintentionally mislabeling or stereotyping a team member, and then your inclusive climate starts to deteriorate. When you don't trust somebody, if there's something in your affinity bias that creates that snap judgment, think about whether you would give them a challenging job that could lead to a promotion or to career growth for them. Because if it's very important to your business as you grow it, who are you most likely going to give that to, right? You could be missing market opportunities and product opportunities. And ultimately, if it goes unchecked and your unconscious bias sort of takes the reins of your decision making, it could lead to an unhealthy work culture. And when you have an unhealthy work culture, you see high churn, low retention rate, and really just lower performance and engagement, right? So just things to be aware of, and that's why it's important to continuously think about your unconscious biases. So what can you personally do to counteract your unconscious bias? Well, the first thing you need to do is learn about unconscious bias altogether. So you can check that off your list. You're done. You've learned about it. So you're familiar with the term, you're familiar with the concepts of it. Then the work starts. What are your own biases? You need to start identifying those. And then, like I said before, is you have to make a plan to challenge them one at a time, not all of them at once, because you'll overwhelm yourself and it gets a little bit too uncomfortable. And you want to do that by building inclusive habits when you decide which bias it is that you want to try and change and challenge. What I really want to emphasize here, and there's this great quote by this trainer, Ben Clark. Remember, if you do not intentionally, deliberately, and proactively include, you will unintentionally exclude. It's just human nature. There has to be this level of awareness and accountability that you hold yourself as a business leader to, that you realize you have to do something proactively and intentionally about it. Because best of intentions and just hoping that, you know, now that we talk about it more and now that it's more in social, in the media and people are more woke, it's just going to naturally happen. But it does take bringing it to that conscious level of awareness. So last quiz, last chance to get to the top of the leaderboard. We're going to go back to Mentimeter and have some fun and reinforce what you just learned about unconscious bias. So again, if you stayed on it, that's great. But I don't know why it keeps going back to the small screen for me. So I'm just going to go back to present. There we go. So let's solidify that learning. Let's see how many people are in there. I think last time we had about 14 or 15. So just hit that thumbs up. And we'll see who is declared the winner at the end of this round. And here we go. So quiz time. So just a quick tip. Most of them are multiple choice questions. There is a couple true or false. So when it is a true or false question, you actually have to type the whole word true or the whole word false. If you put a T or an F, I'm sorry, you and you can't spell it wrong. You won't get the points. Okay, so just be aware of that. Okay, here we go. Oh, Jeff's hanging on there. Last chance. Oh, everyone got it right. Who's the winner? Yes, congratulations. Congratulations, Jeff. You held on to that lead pretty much the entire round. Good stuff. I apologize if that's going to be an earworm, that song for the rest of the evening for you. I saw a couple of people dancing in their chairs. This is the third time I've made this presentation in a short period. So I think I'm going to have to find a different song because it's starting to get to me a little bit. But I hope people found that interactive part fun. Helped really solidify your learning, because I know for adult learners, you know, it's fun to do some of that gamification and to do something a little bit different. All right, I'm going to close Mentimeter because we're done with that for today. And I will go back to the slides. Let's do another activity together. So remember I said, let's examine unconscious bias. So this is where you need your pen and paper. So hopefully everybody's got a notepad nearby and a pen or a pencil. So this purpose of this activity is to increase your awareness of your own biases. So you're going to divide your sheet into 5 columns and 10 rows, and you're going to number your rows 1 through 10. Okay. Once you've done that, you're going to title that first column Most Trusted. And you're going to list 10 people you trust the most, but there's a very important rule. It cannot be a family member or a spouse. So who are the 10 people in your life, at work? 10, I know some people are like, I don't have 10. Especially when you take out family. It could also be somebody that you go to for information, a media source or something like that. So who are those 10 trusted people? Remember, the definition of trust is like being vulnerable with them, going to them when you're seeking advice, and being able to trust sort of your personal stories. And it's okay if you don't have 10. Do the best that you can, but list, you know, a few. Okay. Don't think about it too much. Go with your gut. Don't overthink it. So column number 2, you're going to do some coding for me now. Column number 2, what is their gender? And you're not sharing this information with anyone in the group, so code it how you want, male, female, whatever coding you want. So look at the person in number 1 and what would you classify their gender, and then just move all the way down through those 10 people. Okay. Your next column is age. So again, you can use this coding any way you want. Are they the same age as you? Are they in their 20s, 30s, 40s? However you want to classify that. That's a personal choice of your coding for that. Okay. Let's look at column number 4, being ethnicity. So again, you can use your coding any way you want. You can do Black, white, South Asian, brown. It really is up to you. It's very personal because you're just looking at your own biases and how you're using your own categories. It's your call. Okay, and last column, sexual orientation. So you put down however you want to code that. Heterosexual, any of the LGBTQ category 2+ categorizations you want to use. Okay. So the actual title of this activity is it's called the like me bias. And it really is to identify and increase that awareness of your own affinity bias, right? So that you can challenge yourself to see exclusion gaps and create a plan to challenge the bias that you have. So when you look at that list, how many of those people are the same as you? If you were to code yourself in those headings, how many of them are the same as you? And if most of them are the same, do you feel like it maybe could impact the way you make decisions for your business and how you choose to interact with people? And if your people you trust are all like you, what could you do to try and challenge that a little bit? What would be that inclusion plan? So I'm going to give you an example. I never do an exercise in a webinar or a workshop that I don't do myself. So I did this exercise. I found, I listed 10 people, and I'll give you my results. 10 out of 10 were female for me. 7 of 10 were within 5 years of my age group. And the young people on there, I called them old souls. they were this really mature group. 6 of the 10, when it came to ethnicity, were all people of color. 5 of which were Asian. Okay. 9 of my 10 from the sexual orientation side were heterosexual. So pretty much I have a very clear affinity bias to gather and surround myself with people that are very much like me, that are like-minded. But I realize if I'm going to teach about equity, diversity, and inclusion, if I'm going to push entrepreneurs and businesses and business development, I have to challenge my own biases. So for me, I realized that I needed to create a plan where I could have a meaningful career development relationship with a white male leader. And so that I could really challenge my assumptions that I had about them, because perhaps I had some negative lived experiences, and that's why I was not trusting them. So I even took it one step further. I looked at my network of people, and I reached out to a previous leader that I worked with that I really felt could offer me a lot from a mentorship relationship. And I reached out to him, and he's agreed. December 6th, we start our mentorship program together. He's taken that initiative. So that's what it looks like when you look at your bias, you decide what is it that you're going to address, and then you create a plan. It doesn't have to be this, really difficult thing. It can be, well, when I go to work, if I'm physically able to, who am I inviting to lunch? Who am I getting to know? Or if we have time and we get to a meeting early, do I engage with everyone the same way? Do I ask them meaningful questions to understand their background, right? Okay. So remember that previous statement. I hope that this resonates a little bit more with you from what you learned. Diversity is a fact. Equity is a choice. Inclusion is an action, and belonging is the outcome that you are trying to achieve. I cannot end this webinar without asking you all to join me in a call to action and to build your EDI superpower muscles. But before we do that, I want to show you a very inspiring and motivating video, because I know when we talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion, it can feel overwhelming. It can feel too much. It can feel like my one voice is not going to make that big of a difference. But I'm going to challenge you to think differently about that. So I'm going to share with you this video. I hope the sound works. Just tell me if it's not working, and I'll share this video with you.
You know that little voice in your head? one that tells you to ignore a tasteless joke.
The one that tells you to keep quiet when a client makes a racist comment.
The little voice that tells you you're not smart enough because English isn't your first language.
Or that it's okay to judge someone for leaving early because they have family commitments.
The one that tells you not to say anything when others are being reduced to stereotypes.
Or that it's not a big deal when everyone's opinion isn't considered. You may think you're the only one that hears that voice, but that voice also speaks to other people. It says, you're different.
You're an outsider.
You lack commitment.
Your opinion doesn't matter. Instead of listening to that little voice, you need to find yours and make it heard. It's time for all of us to speak up. Because when we change the dialogue, we can change our world.
I'm going to give you 3 superpowers that you can do to build your EDI muscle. The first one is the power of self-awareness. So continue to learn about your unconscious bias, heighten your level of awareness, challenge your perceptions, and hold yourself accountable. We're going to share this slide deck after with everyone, and it'll be a resource. So all of these resources will be there. There's a really great project called Project Implicit through Harvard University. They have free unconscious preference assessments. They're 10 to 15 minutes each over 90 topics. It's a great way to kind of dive into yours. I did them. I have biases. Some of them I was shocked about because I declare myself a feminist, and yet I had biases about female and their strengths. So you can constantly learn. They're free, and what's great is you continue to feed that data as people study biases. The psychologists the researchers study bias and feeling. The other one too, and you know, this is my project management background, is that there is powers in lessons learned. So it feels like we haven't moved the needle. My daughter always says, nothing's changed, everything's so terrible still. And I say to her, no, educate yourself. There are pioneers who have done EDI work before you. Understand what they've done, learn from it, build on it, and don't repeat it. So I could give you a book list, but I think what's way more fun is a Netflix or Prime Video watching list. Like I said, this will come out to you guys and you can see it. But these are really great documentaries and or series that speak to what work has been done and how you can continue to build on it. And I think the last one that I want to emphasize with you and how you can hold yourself accountable is create that personal EDI mission statement for yourself. Make it simple, make it attainable, make it measurable, right? So I have 2 that I carry close to my heart that I try to live on a daily basis or whenever I can. My first one is I will normalize women and racialized groups speaking up in meetings by intentionally asking for their opinion, supporting their ideas, and ensuring that the entire group recognizes their contribution. I will stop people and say, wait, they weren't finished with their idea. Let's hear what they have to say, right? And my second one is I will connect, and these are my personal ones, yours are going to be different. I will connect as many women as possible in my network to facilitate future job and career opportunities, because I truly believe there's a place for all of us to succeed. There isn't one seat at the table that we need to fight for. So those are some examples. So really, I'm going to ask you, my challenge to you is, which EDI superpower will you build? I'd love for you to pick one, set a due date for your action, keep yourself accountable, tell your friend, tell your spouse, tell your family member, tell a coworker, hey, if you see me in a meeting not do this, message me, Teams message me and go, hey, I thought you were going to speak up a little bit more, or whatever it was that you're trying to do. I would love it if you shared your superpower experience with me using a hashtag like hashtag my EDI superpower and tag me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, would love to add you to my network. Please look me up. I have my consulting firm on there as well as my personal profile. So, I'd love to hear what the superpower was that you decided to pick after today's webinar, and how you're going to build on that, and how you're holding yourself accountable. But if anything, just be brave and be that force multiplier. The one voice multiplies. The one crucial, candid conversation may be that intrinsic moment, motivating moment for someone to go, oh, I never thought of it that way. I didn't understand it like that. So, I challenge you to do that. I think we're cutting it close. We're, I think, just at the 5 to 8 mark. So we're around at the end of the presentation, but yeah, the presentation will be shared. Diana, I'll send that to you. And all of the resources and hyperlinks are embedded in the document, so you'd be able to pull all that up for yourself for future reference.
Thank you so much, Naomi. I'm wondering if anyone in the group has any questions, final thoughts that they want to share before we wrap up. Any comments or anything anyone wants to share at all?
I saw it gave me shivers. I guess that was about the video.
Yeah.
I the first time I saw it, I actually got quite emotional, because I think all of us can think of one of those things and deeply relate to it. And in my equity, diversity, inclusion training, the most powerful tool for EDI is storytelling. So when somebody feels it and it hits that heartstring, that's how you know you're shifting the needle. And as an entrepreneur, you have that ability when you start marketing and campaigning and developing your business. You can have that piece of your business also where you decide that you're going to campaign about something specific, right? But I hope the 2 hours didn't feel like 2 hours.
It didn't at all for me. It actually flew by. So hopefully everyone else felt the same way.
I'm glad to hear it. I feel honored to have shared some of my learnings and passion with you. So thank you so much.
Thank you again for everyone joining us, and hope to see you all next week. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.